Hello, this is Venetia Ramsey from Scrapworx. Today we are going to go through the construction of the mini album, for our well-established collection. Before we begin, I suggest that you have pre-cut, scored and taped everything, all the bits and pieces you need for the construction of this album. Before we start, it'll just make the assembly process a whole lot easier. So we'll start with creating the base pages, then the album cover, and then add the flips and flaps. So gather up your supplies and let's get started. We will start by creating the base pages first. You should have already cut out your binding hinges for me. So the ones that look like this are for the side, and then you should have at least 3 of the binding hinges. Okay, once I've already put my tape on, I put my tape on the dented side, with the little valley. Then you just need to give each piece just a little sliver. You don't have to cut the V in very deep. It is just basically just to take off a little bit of the edge. And I always suggest that you cut from your score line away rather than cut into the score line, because if you misjudge and you cut your spine, you'll have to remake it. So I always find it easier just to cut slightly away from the score line, like that. And even on this big one from the score line, we're just going to trim it away just a little bit, just so that it tucks underneath our pieces of paper nicely. I always cut a few extra binding hinges in case I make a mistake, and then I don't have to try and cut and score again. So I always have 1 or 2 extra on hand in case I make a mistake. Right, so now that you've cut all of those, so you should have spare ones, your 2 side hinges, the one for the left and the right, and then 3 of these, and your 4 base pages that you should have cut. Okay, so to make the pages, the base pages, you'll need to use one of your binding hinges. The easiest way I find is to have it like that, and you can remove your tape halfway. If you are confident, you can take the whole piece off. That is where I will probably be going. And then you need to line your base page up to that score line. Try not to have it go over the score line or be too far away from the score line. So I would say it's like a mil, just maybe even half a mil away from that score line. And then you just want to make sure the top and the bottom is properly lined up before you attach. Okay, and just hold it up and remove it, keep it up, and then put it down so that it then comes out like that, and you have a nice you have the beginning of your spine. Okay, so then we're going to attach the next one to this side. We'll do it exactly the same way. You're going to remove some of your tape, line your piece of paper up with the top of your spine, and make sure that it's going to line up with the bottom. Place it down about a half a mil away from your score line. Hold it up in place. Remove the rest of the tape, and then control where you put it down. Don't let it just fall down. There we go. So that is page 1 and 2. Now you would need to add a binding strip to this page. So the easiest would be to hold it down, to lay it down flat. Oops, wrong one. we are going to attach this one to this page like that. Okay. Remember, you do not have to make your album this way. If you prefer a different binding system, different spine, hinge system spine, you can easily do that as long as your pages measure 15 by 20. That's all. That is the only thing that it needs to be. But how you create your binding spine is entirely up to you. I find this way that I very seldom come out with skew pages. So you can see there's the next one already in place. And I find the benefit of this is that if you do score your binding strips, because we're doing them separately, if you do make a mistake and score it skew, it's easy to just replace one of these than to start doing the spine from scratch. And you will see that my pages lay on top of each other very nicely. And if they did go a bit skew, you can easily pull them into place, line them up, and just burnish this in place. But mine have lined up quite nicely. Okay, so we're going to add the next page. Remember, we're going to remove the tape backing halfway. You are going to line your page up with the top of your binding hinge and with the bottom. It's about 1/2 mil away from the score line. Get that in place, lift it up, hold the page in place, remove the tape backing, and then place this where it needs to be. Remember, don't just drop it because it can drop squiff. So there we go. We have 3 pages so far. Our 3 pages are in, and a nice neat spine being created. Okay, so again, we're going to flatten this, and we need to attach this one, this binding hinge, to this. If you wanted to, you could work with it like this as well, if it confuses you a little bit. As long as this binding hinge touches the end of here. So I'll do one like this as well. Then you've seen both ways. I just find this way a little bit easier because you can see where your page, it's easier to get it straight, I find. So you can line it up with your, at the top there, make sure that you line it up with the edge of the page, get it nice and straight, and then secure that in place so it lines up very nicely top and bottom. Okay, we'll just give that a little burnish. Right, so now we just need to attach our last page. Take this halfway. Line it up with the top and the bottom. Make sure your pages are nice and straight. You see now, if you had trimmed your edge off and accidentally taken half this corner off, you wouldn't be able to line it up quite as straight. Lift, remove the tape backing, hold it, and place it where you want it to be. So there we go, that is your spine. A nice, neat, evenly spaced spine, and then your pages are all nice and neat and line up, nothing going skew or pulling funny like that. So this for me is the best way that I have found that works for me. But like I say, you can use any binding system to create your spine as long as your pages measure 15 across and 20 down, then everything else will work. Right, there we go, so that goes there. So now we would need to attach, you can attach the spine directly into your book like this, and whatever, it will lay nice and flat. But just for me, the chances of it pulling off are always there, so I like to attach something that will make sure that once I put my piece of pattern paper over on this side, that it actually has extra security and it's going to stay in place. So we just need to attach it like this. So you need to attach the short side exactly like we've been doing. The only difference is that we have a longer piece here instead of the shorter piece. Okay, so we're going to attach that one in place. The same thing, you're going to line it up with the page, the top, line it up at the bottom, make sure it's on nice and straight, and attach that in place. And the little 1/2 centimeter is the little gusset that will go into next to the spine that then attaches it to your album cover. But you'll see how it all comes together in a bit. So now we need to do the same thing here. I'm going to attach the short one to this side and the longer piece that way. Okay. So the side pieces, that I call them the wings that we attach are what's going to secure your entire spine and pages, the base of your album, to your album cover. Take that off. Line that up with the page. Make sure it lines up top and bottom. Go and burnish that in place. Right, then I always suggest that you close your album up like that and just double check the measurement that this is going to give you your 3.5, in case you've attached it a bit skew or something hasn't worked. So it's just a little bit wider than 3. So the 3.5 spine that I've suggested you cut will work perfectly. So we measure, hold it down like that. We measure this little piece here to be sure that it's going to, that your spine is going to be broad enough. Okay, so I would then just go through my pages and burnish everything in place one more time. We'll probably still give it another burnish one before we even start to attach the pages. But as long as everything, you can see there, is on nice and tight. Okay. When this goes into your album and we stick it down, your album will always lay flat. So when we open up pages, it's going to lay flat instead of it bulging on the side like that. I find that this binding system is a very efficient way to make sure that your pages always lay flat. Okay, so we can put that aside and we can start with the cover. So for your cover, you will need your 2 grey board pieces, chipboard pieces, cardboard, whatever you use. You'll need the 2 for the left and the right and for your spine. And then I have a full piece of cardstock to be able to do this. If you only have 30 by 30 sheets, you will have to join them to be able to do this. You can either, I prefer to have my join on either on the left and the right of the page or down the center. You can choose how you want to join it. Okay, so the first thing I would do to be able to get this nice and straight is measure 2.5 centimeters from the left of the cardstock and draw a line, and then I do the same here at the bottom. You can see the lines are already drawn in. Then we are going to attach this piece of cardstock, this piece of grey board here. Your spine will go in over there, and the other spine, other side will go in over there, and then I'll go to trim off whatever's left over. Okay, so I think if you're going to have your join running down the middle of the spine, you would need a piece that measures 22 by 26 and another one that measures 21 by 26, and it would overlap on that 22 piece. Right, so basically now all we need to do is add some tape to our grey board and then attach that in place. Now that I've applied tape to the entire area, well, I've left some gaps, but I've put enough tape on my grey board to make sure that it's going to stay secure. You can use glue if you prefer. I find that I prefer to use tape for the cover because tape stays flexible, where glue sometimes dries a little bit hard depending on the type of glue that you use. So basically all we're going to do is remove the tape backing from this grey board and attach it to the background page, to our album cover. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that it's straight, lines up on this line and on the bottom line, like that. Okay. Gone tiny little bit skew, but it's not the end of the world. Right, and then just make sure you give that a good burnish. If there are any air bubbles, that they are out. Okay. Then I like to use, I've got a tape that's 1/2 centimeter in width. I like to use that as my spacer between here and here. So I attach that flush against the grey board. Okay, also give that a good burnish so that it's on nice and strong. And then I'm going to attach my spine flush against that, like that. Right. If you're not sure it's going to be 100% straight, then use your ruler as your guide. So I can just bump it up against the ruler, make sure I line it up nicely at the bottom, double check that it's in line here, perfect, and then burnish in place. Again, I'm going to use the tape as my spacer. And if you have a way that you prefer to cover your albums, no reason why you can't do that. It doesn't mean because it's the way I do it, that that's the way you have to do it. I think as you start to make albums and scrap and all that kind of thing, you develop your own style and you find what works for you and then stick to that. It's just as long as you get all the sizes correct. So as long as your spine is 3.5 centimeters wide, as long as your album cover pieces are 16 by 21, then everything's going to work. Because your pages are the 15 by 20, so if all the little pockets and flaps that we add will fit. You can use your ruler as a guide, or you can just line it up with the tape, and as long as you have it flush against the tape and flush against the bottom of the page, you will be good. Okay, and then like I said, I prefer to use the tape because it is a little bit more flexible. So I would get it on like that and then just fold this way to get that gusset. Make sure that my album is going to fold nicely. And if it isn't pulling 100% straight, now's the time to do it. There we go. And that's going to work out really nicely. Okay, and then my ruler is 2.5 centimeters in width. I would just trim that off. Now pop it in my paper trimmer and quickly trim it. Okay, then the next thing that I like to do is just fold my top and my bottom over before I put the tape on, and then the same here. Just start to break the fibers in the paper. There we go. Right, then I use my little corner goodie. Hop that on, draw a line because I know that's where I need to cut. And the same here, draw a line, cut. Okay. So if you don't have one of these, your best bet is to line your ruler up on a diagonal on the corner, and then to just shift it slightly away from the corner so that you don't trim it flush against this corner, so that you get your little grey board will end up sticking out. Okay, so now to apply tape. So now you would need to obviously do your little lines again, but you see it better on that on the black than on the white. So I'm going to cut that. And when I fold it now, I'm going to have a nice neat corner. Do the same to the other 3 corners. Make sure if you have a corner cutter like I do, that you really make sure that it's on your cardstock good and solid, and that it's straight. Next one. So make sure that it's on properly. Like that. And there we go. So all 4 corners are cut off. I will then go in again and just give it a good fold and burnish this so that we are going to get it nice and flat. I like to work top and bottom, left and right. So one of the things I like to do before we attach the top and bottom is just find the center of my spine and draw a line. I like to make it nice and dark. It just helps when I need to line things up just nice. So when this goes on here, I know exactly where to place my spine. Okay, so now we can just attach the cover. Again, like I said, I like to work top to bottom or bottom to top and then left to right. So now that you've got that, I like to work from the middle, so get it secured in the middle and work my way out like that. Okay, once it's in, you can give it a nice burnish. You can take this tape off. I should have done that first. Okay, so we've removed the spines tape. We can do the other side now. Again, remember, take it to the middle, get it down nice and secure, and then work your way out like that. Give it a good burnish. Then to get this part down, if you lift your cover slightly and just burnish that in. Same with this one, just lift it slightly and burnish that in here as well. Just want that paper to stick to the bottom there. It helps so that you can see if there are any air bubbles in your top and bottom cover that would need to be, there we go. So it gives a nice finish to the spine, the edge of the spine. Right, then we can do the left and the right, right and the left. Same thing, take it from the middle, secure it in the middle and work your way out to the edges. You can then use your scoring tool or your burnisher to get those corners in, just work them in nice and neat. So you can have nice sharp corners. You can also before the time just work them in a little bit if you need to, like that. I don't often do that, I fix them afterwards, but again, no right or wrong, it's what you prefer to do. Again, from the middle and work it out. And when we close it up, we have nice, neat, sharp corners with none of the grey sticking out. And look, if there's anything that needs to be worked on, now's your time. If you do end up where it doesn't cover entirely, I always suggest to have a little bit of black acrylic paint on hand and you just paint it and nobody will even see it. You can always fix it with some pattern paper at a later stage. So that is our album cover done. Next we need to attach this to this. Okay. So the way I do that then, like I said originally, I found the center of my spine so that when this is done, I know that this is 20 centimeters, this is 21. So it needs to be half a centimeter from the top and it needs to attach half a centimeter from the bottom. Okay. You can choose to work either top or bottom, you don't have to mark both sides, but here is where my center is and I'll probably work from the bottom so that I know there's more or less where it needs to attach. I've made the mark slightly away from my half a centimeter so that when this goes on, there isn't a big line sticking out. Okay, so now we need to get these to attach to my center. I need to double check when I put that in there that it's going to make it all the way through, and it will. So now this is the middle of my book. This is the center of this. like that. Fortunately, these marks you can rub out again. So I find the center like that, and I make a very light pencil mark from the top to the bottom. It's just easier to see, easier to fiddle with, the whole thing. So that when I attach now, I know that this line needs to line up here, and we can just take that slightly over. Right. So this line needs to line up over here, and that line needs to line up there, and then I know that I'm going to get my, as you can see, my book in nice and straight. So we're going to apply tape to the back of your to your spine area. Okay, so you want to burnish each piece of tape in place. So open your page, burnish. Page it over. Here's the center one, burnish. And page it over and burnish. Right. I'm going to remove the tape backing from my little 1/2 centimeter gusset and all my little bits and pieces. If you have any tape hanging over like that, you need to cut it off or just fold it away. Otherwise it's going to stick out at the top. Like that. Right, so now we need to attach this in place. So we have already found our center. We're going to attach this one here, so it's lined up there, and then find the center of the top and attach that in place there. So I know my center is in place. My bookie is, my pages are in the same distance, equal distance all the way around. So in nice and straight, we can just burnish all of that into place. Open up. Open up. And the same for the other side. Burnish that in place. Open up. Burnish that in place. Right, so now I want this to work into my groove. So again, you can hold the book up a little bit and then just burnish all of this into place. The other side, you can hold, you can see where your groove is, and then just burnish that into place. Right, you can remove the tape backing from your wing. And so that you don't get any pull on the page, I like to lift it up, and again from the center, just work it to attach like that. Take out any air bubbles, and there we go. Same on the other side. Remove the tape backing from the wing. Lift your album cover up. Work into that groove. And then from the center, just apply a little bit of pressure, and you can then work out the air bubbles. So any pencil marks that you see, you can just remove them. Double check that your bookie is going to work. So as you can see, the spacing all the way around is nice and even. My pages are laying in nice and straight. the spine is secured in really well, and each page is going to open. And as we open and close them and work with them now, the spine, the little hinges will loosen up a bit and your page will lay flat. So that is the cover and the base pages done. And you can see how nicely that goes to lay into the little gusset without breaking the fibers and the spine. Okay, so I'm going to clean up my space and we will be back to add in the flaps and the pockets.